Between 2011 and 2013, the San Francisco 49ers were a fantastic football team and were favored to go to the Super Bowl in those years. But when I also look at the 49ers, they had a quick fall from grace and a lot quicker than people expected. Some people would say they were the next dynasty. Some people would say this was a team that probably should have won a Super Bowl, and that's definitely something. They definitely missed their opportunity there. And when I look at this, there's multiple reasons why they quickly fell from grace. To start off, I thought the struggles on offense played a big role. Even in 2011, when they had Alex Smith, I believe their kicker, David Akers, broke Jerry Rice's point record. This guy's a kicker, so it feels as if that they just couldn't score that much, and it feels as if their only offensive weapon was Vernon Davis, well, at least in the passing game, while Frank Gore was a good runner and all that, and Alex Smith was just simply a game manager by that point. But even when they had Colin Kaepernick, he did pretty well between 2012 and 2013. Those were his two good years. But one thing for sure, when you look at him, he definitely did not run a pro-style offense, and it felt as if he tucked and run way too much. And it felt as if he just didn't have a grasp of the offense. And that especially doesn't help when Jim Harbaugh is more of a defensive mind than he is an offensive mind. And there's definitely a big significance between his offensive capabilities coaching versus his defensive capabilities coaching. And with that college run offense, that became a problem. And the offense was just never really able to develop. And when you look at these offensive players, it just was very unfortunate for the 49ers that they felt as that would be great. But when it came to time when the 49ers had to rely on the offense, they couldn't. The offense struggled and it just didn't develop as they thought that they would. And when I look at this, when I look at Colin Kaepernick, his inability to develop into a pocket passer and developing into a quarterback that would become a star quarterback, his inability to run a pro-style offense was a partial reason with the design. Now, when it comes to their pieces leaving on defense, they lost Aldon Smith, Patrick Willis. Those are some two big players. Now, obviously, Aldon Smith were reasons of him being behavioral. He would say stupid stuff like he would yell bomb at an airport. And then Patrick Willis retired at the age of 30. Now, obviously, concussions are an issue there, but usually a great linebacker that Patrick Willis was, a true sideline-to-sideline linebacker who retired that early at 30 years old, who could still play. And not only him, Chris Borland. If you know who Chris Borland is, he was the 49ers' young linebacker right there, who basically had a lot of promise. And the one thing about the 49ers, like they have with all great football teams, they had next man up. And Chris Borland was kind of like that next man up, but after his rookie season, he retired because of concussions. And you definitely look at that, when you have those pieces leave on defense, that's definitely a big concern. Especially when McDonald is dealing with a lot of suspensions here. And then cornerback Carlos Rogers, after Super Bowl 47, he just never felt as if he was the same ever since he was lit up in that Super Bowl. And when I look at that, as the defense started to leave, they eventually became an average team in 2014. They didn't even make the playoffs. And partially they would say that's the offense's fault, but the defense, when it wasn't all on the field healthy, it became an issue. Yeah, sure, they had a next man up philosophy for sure. And I just look at that and think to myself, well, you feel as if when the defense started to be great, so did the offense. So when you look at the great teams in the NFL, usually they're great on both sides of the ball. And it just feels as if that once the defense left, that was like the heart and soul of the team. And the fact that that's now gone played a huge role on the 49ers' side. Now also, this is one reason that's not really talked a lot about. Bad general managing moves, or general managing moves that just didn't go their way and they ended up losing. Now, the difference between losing in a general managing move and having a bad one is there's a lot. having a bad general managing move is when this is going to be bad from the start. This is just going to be awful. There's no way that's going to work. Versus a general managing move that's a lose is signing Colin Kaepernick to a big contract. Obviously, a guy that takes you to 2 conference championships, that makes a lot of sense to pay him a lot of money. But the fact that he just doesn't live up to his expectations or his potential makes it a very devastating contract right there. And that's some very big questions there. Now, when it comes to them losing on general managing moves, a lot of people forget there were some players or some backups on that Super Bowl caliber team, the 2012 49ers, that are starters right now in the NFL. If you probably heard the name Delaney Walker. Delaney Walker made the top 100. He was actually Vernon Davis's backup. And now when you look at this, Delaney Walker was their backup tight end. He's actually now on the Tennessee Titans doing a lot of great things. He's considered the best blocking tight end in the NFL. And when I look at that, that's kind of like a move where they kind of let go of a player who's a backup, who had a lot of talent there, and then he ends up becoming a star. And obviously, you look at that and you think to yourself, well, they had Vernon Davis, who unfortunately did not work as well as they thought that he was going to work. And now Vernon Davis has actually found himself a home in Washington, and I feel like him being in, or Washington, D.C. most specifically, him being that second tight end right there, he actually is doing a pretty good job, and I just feel as if that's him finding a new home right there. Also, when it came to Alex Smith, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a bad general managing move of trading away Alex Smith. It made sense at the time, but the issue was Colin Kaepernick ended up being worse than Alex Smith, and that's a big problem right there. And the fact is, you trade away a quarterback that ended up being better in the long term, but that's not really the general manager's fault at all. And I just look at that, that's just a loss on the move right there. And when you look at that, that's not bad GMing. And when you get Chris Borland, obviously Chris Borland was a good draft pick. He just ended up retiring early. So there's just a lot of questions when it comes to this, when it comes to the personnel moves that they just kind of went on. And when players retire, because a lot of people forget that 49ers team was fairly old. I believe you had like Stanley was on the roster. You had Michael Crabtree, Crabtree's also one of these players who's doing better without the 49ers. He found himself a home in Oakland, which will soon become the Las Vegas will be his home. And when I look at that, these general managing moves, they're not necessarily bad moves. They're just, you look at them, they're unfortunate moves. They're just unfortunate of what they became. And a lot of people might say it's bad in the sense of talent revaluation, but for the most part, it made sense. It's nothing something as god-awful as letting Josh Norman stripping away his franchise tag, getting rid of him, and not even getting something out of him. That's a bad general managing move by Dave Gettleman. Obviously, these are just unfortunate moves that really should have worked out, but really didn't. And they were a team that actually got quite lucky. As you look at it, they got Anquan Bullitt for a 6th-round pick, and that guy was an absolute stud in 2013. And the fact is, he just didn't work out. He did work out, but ideally that's a lucky move right there to get some value, but they couldn't capitalize on that, and eventually unfortunate results came from their general managing. Now, when it comes to Jim Harbaugh, they should have kept him. Joe Montana agrees with me, and obviously Jim Harbaugh agrees with me. Jim Harbaugh definitely knew how to coach defense well, but offensively he definitely struggled. I know Brandon Jacobs really did not like Jim Harbaugh. If you're interested in what Brandon Jacobs said about Jim Harbaugh, I'll share the link in the description. But ideally, Brandon Jacobs makes sure that Jim Harbaugh doesn't get a job in the NFL. I look at Jim Harbaugh, he's not necessarily the most likable coach in the world, but I don't think it's all about likability when it comes to coaches. Terry Bradshaw and Chuck Noll hated each other, yet at the same time, though, they ended up winning 4 Super Bowls together. I don't think Bill Belichick, I wouldn't say he hates his players or his players hate him necessarily, but I don't think he's the most likable coach either. And also, Brandon Jacobs also was coached under Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin was the most likable guy. So I just look at that, I'm thinking about likability isn't everything. It can be a factor, but sometimes right here, it just isn't. But overall, guys, the 49ers were a great team that fell from grace quickly and surprisingly. If you want to see the last video I made, it was the one on Colin Kaepernick being signed. Link in the description. I'll see you guys later. Peace.
and try to